Well, I just want to thank Mike and the business school for inviting me out here. 2 years ago, I was sitting right where you're sitting now. So I want this presentation to be very helpful to you, very useful. I'm going to include a lot of suggestions and ideas and tips about how to apply, how to get a job at PwC, how to be a consultant, and what that even means. I graduated in May of 2015, and I'm now a senior associate at PwC in Silicon Valley. They're one of the big 4 professional services firms. And if you're not sure what that is, that's okay, because in my first year of MBA school, I also didn't know what PwC was, what a big 4 firm was, what professional services even were, or what a senior associate did. So I'm going to try to answer some of those questions, and then at the end there'll be time for more questions, and I will be at the reception afterwards, so hopefully you can ask any more questions then. So I titled my presentation, Navigating the Gray, as was alluded to before by the keynote speaker. Consulting has a lot of gray areas, and this is also the title of a PwC training video, so I just thought it was appropriate because consulting really is you have to be a jack of all trades. You will hop into a role that's very ambiguous, that not even the client who's hired you knows exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and this happens all the time. And I've been involved in lots of situations where the client's expecting you to actually give them guidance about what is the real problem here, what is the solution, and you're trying to deliver that. So this is just a quick outline. I'm going to take you through 6 steps here. The first one is going to be why consulting. A second, I'm just going to go over the consulting landscape, talk about the players and who does what. Third, I'm going to focus on some of my own work. I'm going to show you slides of presentations I've made to clients and client deliverable work I've made, just to give you an idea of what the actual work is like, what you're going to be doing, to see if you like it. Fourth, I'm going to talk about what skills you need to succeed from my own experience. Fifth, what are some of the things you can do, specific things you can do to get a job at PwC or a consulting firm if you want, and then some time for a Q&A at the end. So why choose consulting? Just from my experience, there's really 4 key areas. The first one is you're going to get to work with C-level and VP level people from day one. Depending on your client group and your engagement, this is just a great opportunity because you're working on tough strategic problems that you often don't get a chance to work on going into companies with an MBA. Second, there's many different industries you're going to be exposed to, a lot of different technology platforms. You're going to be able to learn about what you like and what you don't like. Learn about industries that you're passionate about or those you don't care for, and hopefully hone in your focus at PwC or your consulting career in something that you're really passionate about. The third thing is you're going to be able to network really well. So as you interact with clients, every couple of months you have a new client engagement. And so you're going to be meeting and interacting and building a great network, both with the clients and with your team at PwC. And the people at PwC are, across the board, pretty smart, pretty passionate people. So you're going to be learning a lot from them. And the fourth thing is just the job outlook. So, it's growing at about 7% a year. Consulting is growing very rapidly as a field, so there's lots of new opportunities. There are boom and bust cycles, so some years they hire more. PwC hires up to 10% employees, increasing their consulting force by 10% a year. Other years are less. So it just kind of depends. When I got hired on a year and a half ago, it was growing very rapidly. It still is growing rapidly. The outlook is good. So it's just a good statistics you can get in. But the fifth thing, and something that recruiters don't really talk about, is this quote here that I pulled from Ernst & Young website. It's indicative of the culture there, and it's something that is brought up often, is what the work-life balance is like. I can tell from experience that I've had directors who will email me or call me at 8 p.m. on a weekday and say, can you get this work done in the next hour? And the expectation is you will. And the expectation is if you turn that kind of thing down, you won't get promoted or you might get let go. So you have to be willing to accept those kind of caveats when you want to go into consulting. Kind of any plans you have for your life take second priority to the work, and that's just expected. So whether or not that turns you on or turns you off, it is a bit of a mixed bag. But here I want to talk about the consulting landscape. So who are the big players here? Like I said 2 years ago, I didn't really know of any of these companies, and you could potentially be working for any of them if you go into consulting. So the first category is the management consulting groups, also known as the MBB, so McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. They focus on just the very typical MBA stuff you guys are learning: operations, HR, management, marketing, IT consulting, kind of a little bit of everything. They're very, very prestigious, very, very hard to get into. The next category are the Big Four professional services firms. They all go in a category because they don't just do consulting, they do tax and advisory as well as consulting. So because they do tax and advisory after Sarbanes-Oxley Act, you have to be much more careful of who you can consult with if you're also doing their tax. So there's a lot of regulations you have to deal with at this level that you don't have to deal with for just the business consulting firms. And lastly, there's what I call the specialty consulting firms like Accenture, Booz Allen, and Capgemini. They focus on niche areas like marketing or IT, and they're also just really good choices to get into for consulting. So this gives you just a map of what the associate role is like and kind of who the players are, who you interact with, who your boss is. So at the top, on the PwC side, you're always working for a partner. The partner has the relationship with the client CEO who's hired them. Under the partner are several managers or directors. On a typical engagement, this is what my structure looked like. I had one partner, 2 managers, and then under that about 6 associates. The associates are who you work with every single day. Either it's remote or it's in person, or it's at the client side or it's at the PwC office. It all depends on the engagement. The associates actually do the work. And so you pass it up to your manager, who passes it to the partner, which gives it to the client. So it's a big chain of command. The client then passes it down to someone like an associate on their side who looks at the work, and if they have questions, they contact you. So as an associate at PwC, you're expected to just communicate very professionally with the other associates and the managers at the client site. And these are skills that we've been learning here in the MBA program: communication, being very professional. An example is, PwC has a very set way they want you to do emails. It's very professional yet friendly. You just say, hi, someone, comma, here's your question in a sentence, thank you, your name. They don't want you to talk about a lot of other stuff. It's just straight and to the point, professional yet friendly. So the next section is a couple of examples from my own work. This is my most recent project. At PwC, they encourage you within 6 or 12 months to kind of define a specialty, something that you're passionate about, becomes your niche, you kind of become the expert in that. And I had the opportunity, because I focused on marketing here in my MBA, to get certified in the Adobe Experience Manager product and the Adobe Marketing Cloud. PwC paid for my training, paid for me to take the certification exam, because the team I was in needed someone with this skill set. So I volunteered and I got the certification. So I've been certified for a year. And with the certification, we were able to go in and for this client, re-engineer and reimagine their experience center. So you can see there's a couple of pictures here of touchscreen kiosks and a big touchscreen wall. So this is a Fortune 500 manufacturing company in computer hardware. And they have this experience center where they want a client to come in and visualize how they can hire this company to make something better, like Pepsi. How can they make a better can for Pepsi? So we re-envisioned this whole experience center for them, and the whole backbone was the Adobe Experience Manager. It's kind of a website shell that these touchscreens go in. So I was a project manager for that engagement, and I got to interact both with the client, going to meetings and listening to their business requirements, what they're trying to solve, convert that into the website that we're building, custom templates and custom components, test it on site, and then give demos to the client. So that was probably my most fun project. This next one is an example of a very common scenario at PwC. Probably nobody can understand this. The consultants made this for the client. Probably the client doesn't even understand this. Hopefully the consultants do. This was one of my first projects. So oftentimes the client has a very complex situation. You can imagine you're a Fortune 500 company. For the last 10 or 15 years, you've been piecing together IT systems, software systems, to add this or to add that functionality. But rarely does anybody know how it all works together. And they run into problems where something breaks or they need to upgrade, but they don't know what it's going to affect. So they'll hire a team of technology consultants, or PwC or one of our competitors, to come in and produce this kind of analysis where we'll look at different layers. This one was looking at marketing and IT software for this large company. So we looked at who are the stakeholders, right? You have business, you have partners, you have IT. Does it affect the marketing strategy? How does it affect the user experience? So if unraveling very complex systems appeals to you, if you like this kind of visual, you like making this kind of stuff, then technology consulting might be really great for you, because there's a big demand for people who can just take a very complex, ambiguous problem and make some sort of sense out of it and then present it to a client so they can understand it. Now, this next example was a more interesting project I got to work on. We were creating buyer personas. So this company was trying to launch a new cloud product, and they were trying to figure out, well, who are our buyers? What are they looking for? And so as the senior associate, we also do a ton of research. So all the research skills that you're learning now are very important if you're going to go into consulting, especially at a senior associate level. You are the research workhorse. You go out and you find Forrester reports, Gartner reports, and other professional reports. You don't do your own surveys. You actually just source it from others, and you often just buy that information. Out of that information, you just generate highlights. You draw out the key insights, and you're trying to make it really relevant to the client's problems. One of the key values that a consultant brings is not to provide a generic slide to a client, but something that every single word here makes sense to the client. If the client sees something that's too generic, they get really turned off. So consultants make it very, very connected to the client's needs. And so this next one also shows how we often piece together a lot of different elements in a client's IT system that's been developed haphazardly over a decade into something that makes sense so they can make decisions. So as we're building out some of these connections, what the consultant's doing is doing interviews, researching from the client, and putting together some sort of logical map. Because there's nothing worse than having a bunch of acronyms all over the place, and it just makes alphabet soup. So putting a map on it is one of a consultant's kind of key capabilities. And again, this is horrible and complicated. Nobody even wants to look at this. But to a client who's never understood how this works in the first place, kind of a light goes on, and they see some value in hiring a consultant. So if this kind of thing excites you, if you think, wow, this looks really cool, then I can definitely recommend technology consulting as a path for you. But one of the things I like doing the most in my job is working with my team to develop internal methodologies. This is one we developed called Prism. And Prism is a methodology to go in and do a website user experience and user interface analysis to quantify the problems and the highlights to give it a numerical value. So the client can then say, here's what I'm doing poorly at, here's what I'm doing well at, and we give recommendations of what they need to improve. And then, of course, as a consultant, we're always trying to upsell. So we'll give a recommendation and say, you need to improve your SEO, your search, and your user login capabilities. But then we're going to try to say, and we can do this. It'll take us 6 months and cost $2 more million. So the director level is always trying to sell the client. The first phase is give the recommendations. The second phase is to sell. And that's just how all the consulting works. So on the left, you'll see just an example. This is what we'd show the client describing how our process works. And there's different facets that talk about different aspects of the web experience. And on the right is an actual analysis that I did. You can see they have a score, 2 out of 5. We break down the score between all the different facets. And there's probably 30 or 40 different individual components that went into that score, each of which took me about an hour to research. So this was probably a week-long project, just providing this information to the client. Another key area, like I mentioned, for senior associates is this research and analysis bit. So this is some research we did for a client to help them understand their current situation. Consultants don't do this primary research, so we will just look at third-party resources, and we'll make bar charts and graphs and just pull out slides, and this will go into a pitch deck for a client to help them understand the trends that they're seeing in their industry, and ultimately to pitch them on, well, we can help you improve in this area or that area, and to get that follow-on work. So what are some of the skills that I think you guys you'll need if you want to go into consulting? Well, I separated them into soft skills and hard skills, both of which I know that are focused here in the business school. One of the key soft skills is flexibility. And what I mean by this is that flexible in what and how you're working, if it's going to be remote, if you're going to drive to a client site or fly to a client site. Of course, consultants are often expected to fly all over the nation or the world. I've flown to Texas in the Midwest for several weeks on engagements, and it's never fun, but they expect you to be flexible. And the other side of the coin is, oftentimes I'm allowed to work from home because there's no need for me to go anywhere. So it's all about being flexible. Some weeks you might have to go somewhere, other weeks you'll be at home, which is always really nice. So you have to be completely flexible. And I can't stress it enough that the people who leave after the first year are those who just can't handle the uncertainty and who are too inflexible. Another soft skill that's important is communication. I know several people have talked about this already today, but communicating upwards to your manager is really critical. For example, starting a new engagement, asking questions to your manager about information we need to get from the client. Often you don't have a direct connection. So it's your responsibility to be asking really smart, insightful questions at the beginning to communicate and to get the information you need to make a successful start of an engagement. Another communication, of course, is with the associates you're working with at their level. So being professional, like I mentioned in the email communication, just being professional and succinct, and the communication skills you're learning here will help you a lot there. Hard skills, PowerPoint and Excel. I think every single thing I've learned in the business school with PowerPoint and Excel I've used, and I've learned a lot more. Sometimes I wonder what consulting would be like if PowerPoint didn't exist, because 90% of our work is PowerPoint. If PowerPoint didn't exist, I don't know, consulting might not exist either. So PowerPoint is always the front-facing, what you show the clients. The Excel models are always what's in the background, usually generating your data. So the Prism model, for example, is a very complex Excel spreadsheet that we ran. So PowerPoint and Excel, learn all that you can with PowerPoint and Excel. Push the boundaries, try out new things, because from day one, PwC expects you to be able to master those things right away. Also, another key hard skill I said here is just rapid learner. So PwC, like a lot of their clients, has dozens of antiquated systems you're expected to use. I mean, websites for client engagement, for this or that. There's probably 20 or 30 that I've learned how to use, and they all look like they were made in the 80s. They're the least intuitive systems you can imagine. And you're expected to, within, in the morning, learn how to use something to have a result produced by the end of the day. So you're expected to go out and take training videos that are available on the PwC website, make calls to IT if you need help, and just figure it out. So just being a rapid learner is super important, and not getting frustrated with these horrible systems that all these big four consulting firms use on a day-to-day basis. And finally, it's just certification. So I wondered when I started, I asked my boss, are there any certifications I should get coming into this job that'll help me succeed? And they didn't really give me an answer. And I understand why now, because you could get an ITIL or a Microsoft certification, but depending on the role you go into, it might be completely not necessary. I ended up getting certified in the Adobe Marketing Cloud because that was the project that I got put on, and that's what the team needed. So certifications are an important hard skill to get, but they just completely depend on where you end up going, and some of that's based on your interests. So I was interested in marketing, and I got in that niche. There's definitely other niches to get into. So certifications that before you start aren't important and aren't really looked for. So some of you are probably going to go into consulting, some maybe even with PwC. So these are some pieces of advice on how to successfully get a job at PwC. The first one is, just make sure your LinkedIn profile is updated. I know that the business school does talk about that a lot, but focus on things like leadership and problem solving and your technology skills. One of the first things PwC recruiters do is they will look there and see if any of your skills align up with a need in the business. So example, digital marketing is my expertise. If I was applying to PwC now, I'd list that as often as possible. And just making sure that's up to date, because if it doesn't look like it's a match, the recruiter will probably not go forward with you. The second thing is find PwC employees on LinkedIn. Alums from William & Mary or your undergrad school are great places to start. Introductions from professors are another great place to start. And what my approach was, finding PwC employees in the cities that I was interested in living in. I ended up in San Jose. And asking them for a brief 30-minute phone call. And on the phone call, I just asked them about their jobs, told them about myself, tried to get them interested in my background and experience. Because the key to it all, and this is what the recruiters will never tell you, is that PwC and the Big Four, they only hire MBAs from their targeted schools, which are about the top 5 or 6 nationwide. William & Mary is not in that league. So if they see an MBA applicant from William & Mary, off it just goes in the trash. But the secret is, if you get an internal employee referral, which any employee can do at any level, doesn't matter if they're an associate or a partner, they see you as an MBA and they don't care what school you're from. So you immediately get put in the same class as Harvard MBAs or Stanford MBAs. So it's a huge difference. Applying through the website is never going to get you anywhere. So my biggest piece of advice is to network with a current PwC employee. If they like you enough, they can refer you through the system. And from what I've seen, that pretty much guarantees a first-round interview. And with an MBA, again, it doesn't matter that you got it from William & Mary. Your salary and everything, they're going to start you out quite a bit higher as opposed to someone without an MBA. So that's a huge piece of advice. And finally, the interview. There's usually 3 phases. My interview is in 3 phases. First is just a case study. So anybody who's interested in consulting has done case studies before. Typical case study prep. Really nothing fancy there. Mine, they did give me 3 questions ahead of time, and they're going to ask me kind of one of them. So I got 24 hours to prepare the heck out of it. You know, I did research, I made notes, so I knew the answers to all 3. It didn't matter which one they chose, and I did a good job. The second thing is they're going to do just a behavioral interview. The main thing is that they're just looking for people who are good communicators and are friendly, because as the joke kind of goes in consulting, you know, they want to make sure you're going to have a personality that's not going to be combative if you're sitting in an airport or on an airplane with your team for 20 hours and you're flying around the world. And that's a reality, is that consultants work together much more than 8 hours a day often. So they're looking for people who are just friendly, have interesting stories, and honestly, you know, when you meet in the interview, you meet the people, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for someone, would I like to hang out with this person in an airport for 8 hours? Yes or no? And the third thing is the group interview. It's a skill set interview. So there's often 3 or 4 PwC employees asking you about your skills, asking you about examples of your work. And again, they're trying to determine, are you someone they would like to work with? And not just work with, but almost live with. Because, you know, when you go travel, when I travel to Texas, it's Monday through Thursday. You're staying in a hotel. Often it's the same hotel as your coworkers, so you're kind of living with them for the majority of your week. So they're trying to make sure that it's a good fit, a good personality fit, that you're not someone who's going to, you know, throw a wrench into the machine so much. So I hope that some of these tips and some of this advice was helpful, and I do want to leave some time for questions, maybe a couple minutes. Yeah. So yeah, ask me any questions you want, and then I will also be around at the cocktail hour. So I'd love to meet some of you who are interested and tell you more about it.